R-O-U.
R-O-U.
The transition from study into work is often difficult. These days, many students are also required to complete job placements or internships during their studies. Today on the ROU podcast, students Moya and Gemma discuss these important issues with the Business School's Director of Work Integrated Learning, Associate Professor Rachael Hains-Wesson.
Hi, Rachel. Can you tell us a little about yourself and your role here at the Business School?
Sure, Moya. Thanks for having me. Hi, Gemma. I'm the Director of Work Integrated Learning. I'm an Associate Professor, so I have a teaching role, a research role and a service role. I originally come from Perth, Western Australia, where I did my PhD at the University of Western Australia. I've travelled all the way across to the east coast of Australia because Western Australia is pretty small and there's not a lot of opportunity. So I ended up in Melbourne. I spent my early career there working at numerous universities across the different areas of my expertise, sometimes in creative industries, sometimes in education, and most of the time in work integrated learning. I've just recently come to the University of Sydney Business School. I've been here 12 months, absolutely loving it. The staff here and the students are awesome, like used to. And I'm basically responsible for making sure every pre-experienced student in the business school has a high quality work integrated learning experience as part of their study.
Well, it's interesting to know your experience, but comparing to face-to-face online delivery of content, which one is better you think to deliver the knowledge to the student?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a question that comes up all the time. I actually would say that there's a different way of answering that. I wouldn't say that face-to-face or online is better than one or the other. I think it really depends on the situation and what you're trying to do. So for me, I prefer a blended approach, which means that you're using both face-to-face and online learning, but you're doing it in a purposely designed way. So sometimes it's really important to have that face-to-face connection, both for students and staff, to come together and collaborate and discuss. And you can actually see emotion, you can sense it, you can work on difficult issues and you're both together in the same room. Not always great for large cohorts, and sometimes having that online experience is really important. Every student comes with a different learning style, communication style and expectations. So I wouldn't say one's better than the other. Really depends on what you're trying to do.
Actually, in the reality for the international student, they prefer to study online because they may feel shyer to talk to their tutor face-to-face. So how can the international student overcome this?
I think a lot of domestic students are the same as well. I don't think it's necessarily just an international student perspective. I think confidence and speaking in public and making sure your ideas are clear and coherent is challenging for everyone. The only way around that is to practice. So I have a lot of people saying to me, well, when I do a presentation and I get to do it face to face, it's a lot better than when I have to do a presentation online. And I'd actually argue that and say, when you look at the skills you're learning in face to face for presentation and you look at the skills in terms of having to speak to a camera, exactly like what we're doing right now, we don't know who is listening to us, but we're talking and we're discussing issues. You have to use a whole heap of different types of skills. You have to use voice inflection, pace your conversation, imagine your audience. That's a lot harder than necessarily being in a face-to-face presentation. It's all about practice, and more practice.
Yeah, I totally agree. I would like to know, why is communication so important to our academic studies?
Without doing academic studies that concentrates on your skill development level in terms of when you start, how you progress, and how when you graduate in terms of communication is really important and detrimental to your career if you don't have those skills. What I've noticed, what industry is saying, is that not all students when they graduate are ready for work. And one of the key areas is that they're not communicating very well. Sometimes their articulation's not great. They have an accent, things like that. And in an Australian business context, that can be really challenging. Also, presenting, they're not necessarily confident. They struggle to make their ideas clear when someone's looking at them. So I think it's really important for us, especially for international students, that we're giving them a lot of exposure to different types of audiences, not just your peers, but industry, and maybe even a tough audience that's going to say, hey, I can't understand you. Hey, slow down. Or ask you a question in the middle of your presentation. That to me is really authentic and real, and it's going to get you job ready.
Just as you mentioned before, sometimes it's difficult for the international student to find a job after they are graduated. So how can these students find an internship in Australia in this situation?
That's a really good question, Gemma. It's something that international students are asking more about. A lot of international students are coming to Australia to get that job experience, aren't they? And sometimes in the program, that's not always offered. There's other interesting areas that you need to be aware of as an international student. You need to be aware of your work visa or your study visa. Make sure you're allowed to do internships. Also, we have a thing called the Fair Work Act in Australia, making sure that you're not taking on an internship and not getting paid for it if you're actually doing work that the company would normally need to employ someone to do. For the business school, it's really important for us that when we're sending our international students on placements or internships, they're always not paid, but we make sure they're part of your program, that there's a real key element in terms of your learning, not actually doing work in an industry where they would actually need to be paying someone to do that. And that's what the Fair Work Act stipulates. In terms of getting experience, when you come here and you don't have experience, you got to go and find it. So you can't just rely on the business school or the universities to give that to you. Not in Australia, we don't work like that. What we're after graduates that show initiative, that go out there and don't just wait for something to come to them. So things like joining societies, clubs, going out there and volunteering, doing social enterprise, doing projects that matter and make a difference to community. It's not all about getting the great internship in ANZ. There's things called small to medium enterprise businesses. They're actually getting more willing to take on international students. The other key element is making sure that when you're talking to industry or you're wanting to have that placement or internship, that you're thinking about aligning your skills to a company that actually wants to maybe broaden out to China, and how your skills that you already have can actually add value. So I've been hearing through the grapevine that a lot of industries that are wanting to break out into China, for example, but are positioned here in Australia, really want international students on placements to actually help them with language, culture, networking, and breaking out, so that when you go back to China, you can also still stay in contact with the Australian-based industry and you're still able to help them explore global opportunities. It's really hard for international students to get placements here in Australia. So we actually try to think about it a bit differently. Placements and internships aren't everything. We can't promise you that we're all going to be able to give an international student a placement. What we can do, though, is we can promise that in the curriculum, so in your program, you can work with industry at some point. Things like projects where you're actively trying to solve real problems that an industry has come to the classroom and said, hey, I need groups of students to solve a real problem in my business and come back with a deliverable that's going to help improve my businesses. That's what needs to happen in your program. We term that work-based learning, project-based learning, and work-integrated learning that's happening in the curriculum. Most employers are saying that when you're graduating, that the skills that you're lacking are teamwork, knowing how to collaborate with different and diverse people coming from different cultures, backgrounds, ideas, and disciplines. And when you have an opportunity arise, put your hand up. Don't be shy. Not everything is about the corporate industry.
Thank you, Rachel. And do you have any suggestion on what can we do to better prepare ourselves in order to successfully transfer our role from a student to an employee?
Yeah, I can. So have you guys heard of a thing called career development learning?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is definitely one thing. I think we're very lucky at the business school. We have our own careers and employability office, and they are there to support students who are transforming from a student into a job-ready graduate. I actually don't think students are using that service as much as they should, right? So they have networking opportunities, career development opportunities, workshops, online resources. At the end of the day, it's not about the university giving you everything, the opportunities. The opportunities are there. You need to find them. You need to be proactive, engaged, go out there, don't take no for an answer, and make sure you're always putting your hand up for everything.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
You're
Thank
welcome.
You, Rachel.
Good luck with the preparing now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'll prepare today.